All right. So, hi, I'm Wendy Murdoch. This is Webinars with Wendy. It's Monday night, and I have Lynn Reardon with me. I know another Lynn Reardon from a long time ago when I lived in Kentucky. She was an artist. And so every time I see your name, I think of her. I don't know if you've ever been to Lexington and seen all the incredible bronze sculptures. Yeah. So you have a very important name because every time I think of her. Yeah, she was awesome. Anyway, so welcome and thanks everybody for joining us for another webinar. Just remember all these webinars are recorded, and so you can find them on Webinars with Wendy, wendymurdoch.com/webinars. I'll pop it in the chat. Tonight, my guest, as I said, is Lynn Reardon, and I'm going to let her introduce herself because she has some perspective on this impending veterinary crisis. So welcome, Lynn. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, it's so strange to be the guest because I'm used to interviewing you on my podcast. So I'm all like fluttery and nervous. It's like, I'm going to be interviewed by Wendy. It's a big deal. But I have kind of an interesting background. I came to horses really later, like as an adult, and then they basically took over my life. So I used to be kind of a normal person with a corporate career. And it wasn't enough just to own horses. I ended up running a racehorse adoption program called Lope. And as a result of that work, I really came to understand, I think, the horses from a different perspective. I was so green and new. I was not a professional trainer. I would just sort of listen to what they were telling me. So after doing that for 20 years, I developed this, I guess you would say it's a curriculum for how to approach the horses, but also to really learn from them. I'm the one that really feels like I learned from them. And then over time, Lope became less of a rescue and more of an education program. We started a teen program. We started working with youth interns. And then during COVID, we started teaching basically neighborhood learning pods. We did field trips. I also have a teaching background. I taught community college, which is another whole story. So I taught subjects.
Let's dive into that. I love knowing the background on people because I think it has such a big impact on what you're doing now. So you were in the corporate world. Okay.
I was in the corporate world. Yeah.
What were you doing there?
I was a director of finance and administration for a large university think tanks. So, which is a really glorified way of saying office manager, because we had all these economists who were brilliant, but they could never find their staplers. And then I did run the financial side. And so I was responsible for making sure that we stayed on budget and so forth. And I started to ride horses as a reward. Really, it was the first time I got a big raise. And I began to learn how to ride formally, and I learned and relearned all the wrong ways, and I have a lot of hilarious stories from that era. But eventually I owned horses and I got drawn into this world of the ex-racehorses. And at that point I started teaching part-time because it was more fun to do that than have a 9-to-5 job. And that's where I started teaching. It started out, I was teaching business riding, business presentations, and then the school got bought. And they started offering graphic design certificates. And they asked me if I could teach graphic design. And I said, sure. And I didn't. I had no idea. But I'm like, how hard could that be? So I was known for, the students really liked my classes because they were like, she really makes us do the work ourselves. And it's like, yeah, because I don't really know how to do this. So that was how it all kind of came together. And it was really fun. I learned how to teach students from all different kinds of backgrounds and to have a creative approach. And I ended up really falling in love with that whole idea of teaching, which by the time when I got to the horses, it became this whole thing where I really saw myself as a student, even when I was a teacher, because I was teaching myself the material like a half hour before I would teach it to the students in the community college. So I think I had this open mind already coming into the horses. And then I didn't have the professional training background. I didn't have this sense of this is how you're supposed to do things with horses. So we had no money as a small charity. So I would get out with these horses and I'd be like, well, this seems to make him more nervous and this seems to relax him. So I just spent time looking at the horses, like trying not to die, and then from there it really. But
you've already told us, see, and this is what I find so interesting because you've already told us you have a skill set in finance, which so many horse people don't, and therefore struggle with whatever they organization they form, right? I mean, that's a big one. And then you've had teaching experience. And so you had to deal with all different kinds of kids. And, in so many ways, a lot of different kind of horses is like working with a lot of different kinds of kids or dogs or cats, right? Because you have to figure out how they work and figure out how to motivate them to do like not knowing graphic design. I think that's wild, because you had to figure out how to motivate them to learn something that you were only a step ahead of them, it sounds like. Right.
That's right. And all really good teachers are just a step ahead of their students, maybe not so much by casual chaos like I was, but don't all teachers want their students to be so good that they're having to literally study the night before to be slightly one step ahead. So at least that's what I want. I love the idea of being surpassed by the people I teach. And
I'm going to stop you there because I don't want you to skip over this. One of the things that my Feldenkrais teacher, Mia Siegel, who's my mentor and who's an amazing, amazing woman, always said to us is she wanted her students to exceed right? Mm-hmm. And sadly, in the horse world, that is not the tenet it should be. That there are many, many trainers and teachers that are terrified of having their students exceed them, because then they won't feel like they don't know enough. And I'm sure you've run into this. And I think that it's one of the things in our world, and it's not just our world. Okay, this is not unique to the horse world, but I think it's one of the things in our world that is also, and Madeline, you can chime in on this if you want, but it's also part of this vet crisis that we're facing, because if you don't allow people who have expertise outside of your expertise to be able to do what they do well, then it's to a loss for everyone, right? And I think that it's not that they have to be what you are, but you have to acknowledge the gifts that they have that they're bringing to the table to make this whole package work for the horse, the owner, and all of the pieces that go around that. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over, but that's such an important point.
Yes. And I think one of the challenges in the veterinary world is that veterinarians are held to this high standard. So they are legally liable. They are held to state accountability, federal, depending on their role. If they're working at racetracks, they have multiple levels of accountability. So the standard by which they are judged and the output of their work is the way that it's judged is a lot different than teaching, which is extremely subjective. So I think I'm a good teacher. I get great feedback that I'm a good teacher, but it depends where you put me, right? And what I'm being judged against. And if I teach a lesson poorly one day, horses don't die. Horses don't have malpractice. And so that is something that is difficult to unpack when you're looking at that upcoming crisis, how to balance out with people who may be excellent at what they do. I have met body workers who are amazing. I've also met body workers who are complete charlatans, and no one can really tell the difference because they're not held to any kind of a true standard other than this. It's a little bit subjective. So in the sense of licensing, so that's the frustration, I think, is that how do you maintain that standard without creating so much of a bureaucracy that people who are really good at what they do don't have the opportunity to come in and practice in a way that is beneficial to everyone. I know plenty of vets who refer alternative therapies quite often, but it's often only to specific individuals, but then they can get in trouble if they overdo that. So they sometimes end up in a situation where their hands are a little bit tied too. And but I think you'll see definitely a re-examination of, how do you certify that this is evidence-based and how do you maintain the accountability so the vet doesn't get into a situation where they're like, hey, I've got this great team of body workers and holistic people and they are amazing. And then there's a problem, and then the vet is the one who's liable for what the animal would. And again, that can be perceptual on the part of the owner. A really good vet will tell you that some lamenesses, are really hard to diagnose, and sometimes they don't want to hear that. So anyway, that's kind of it's a very interesting conundrum. And the way that I've chosen to kind of look at it is, how do we get people interested out of the starting gate, meaning little people, people who are in school, to be really interested in science in general, but as applied to veterinary and into these careers where they're coming in with a passion and a real focus on the animal, and then understanding the science and the mechanics behind it in a way that is more elevated, like making it more than just simply something they have to do to get an A or a B in school. So, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of different solutions coming in over the next few years. And I think it's kind of an interesting in both the good and not so good sense, right? So.
Right. No, I mean, Madeline says horse health is too big for just the vet to be the only expert. And we are sometimes you need chaos to shake up a system and come up with something better. Right. And I think that's one of the things that we're facing right now, is we're kind of in that chaos where we're trying to figure out how we can come out of this. And this is why it's so important that we're all talking. How do we come out of this with something that's even better than what we went in?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm sure that most veterinarians would agree too, that something in the expectations has to change on their side too, because one of the reasons that you're seeing this equine vet shortage, certainly not the only reason, but one of the reasons is that the lifestyle is so demanding.
Yeah. And it's a huge reason. And
it's dangerous. It's physically dangerous. And if something happens, they are 100% accountable. And sometimes there's so many things you can't control. And so that's something that makes it really hard. It makes it no win, I think, for some people, depending on the type of practice they have, because they can't possibly take all of the liability or all of the responsibility, but they're kind of required to. And I think that that's something that becomes problematic too. What you may see is separate levels of certification for different types of alternative therapies, so that people can feel like, oh, this is evidence-based, and there's a certification process. Like I said, the example I gave, I mean, I know body workers who are incredible, and I know ones that are awful. And if you don't have the background, in horses, or maybe you don't, one of the things I'm fortunate is I've worked with a lot of horses just because of the nature of my work with the ex-racehorse charity. If you don't have that perspective, it can be really hard to distinguish. And so it would be nice to have a way to distinguish that. And so that it's not so much of a guessing game, right? So.
Yeah, no, and while we're talking, I realized I need to have the president of AAETT come on and do a webinar, Michelle.
For sure.
So that, because there are things going on that are happening, but it's a long process. It's not going to be a solution tomorrow. But this idea is percolating, and we have to survive the process, right? And keep the conversations going so that we come out, like I said, with something better than what we went in with.
Absolutely. And then just kind of getting back to what I do, that's how I kind of cut my teeth in the horse world, so to speak. And we developed guys that got more into education, and that was a natural, obviously, with my odd background. And I found that a lot of the people we were adopting to, who were professional trainers, had no idea about certain things in horsemanship that I thought were pretty automatic, but I thought were really basic, And not that I felt superior, more the opposite. I was like, oh, how come you guys don't know this? That's weird. If I know it, everybody should know it, because I kind of came this weird, convoluted path, right? And I ended up writing a book that, was a bestseller locally and on Amazon, that just shared my experience with the horses, like what I learned from them. And that I learned really that having that open mind, that kind of beginner's mind, was actually what had helped me the most. So we started doing more youth programs, and then over time, what happened is that I had people in their 30s and 40s and 50s. They would say, hey, I saw what you did with my nephew or my grandkid. I want to become an intern. And Lope really had no mechanism for teaching adults. So that's when I started Horsewise. And that's my private kind of I guess you'd say it's for profit. Most of the money that I earn goes to Lope anyway, because I just really, that's kind of my thing. But that is where I teach people horsemanship, kind of getting their awareness of maybe things that are happening with their horse that they weren't really seeing before. And that's where the podcast was born. And that's where I sort of formalized the curriculum that I'm putting together and teaching in the schools. I license it to Lope to give away to the schools, to K through 12 kids. We do field trips through Lope and learning labs at our facility. We confer with the teachers and we say, what are you teaching in science and math now? What is your hardest concept this semester? And we will tool our demonstrations to that using Texas standards of education. So
you're in the state of Texas. I think you were in California. You're in okay.
Yeah.
So you're actually working with regular public schools?
I'm working with a couple of public schools now. I'm also working with a lot of homeschooling groups and private schools. It takes a while for the public schools because they have a whole process for being approved as a field trip. But the way that we have sort of angled in is we do teacher workshops that are used for continuing education credit for them, where we show them ways to use horse imagery to teach science and math concepts that track with their actual curriculum. So it isn't simplistic. It isn't just like, oh, count the number of legs on the horse. We'll go into complex word problems, things like that, and match it up. And we show the teachers interesting ways that the material that they have to teach that maybe they're getting almost feeling not supported on, they're getting, teachers are very spread thin, right? It's just a fun way to show them a new approach to teaching. And there's animal and horse imagery all over the internet. You don't have to bring your kids here. And it also sets up for the field trips. We have done some field trips here that were very well received. And we've also actually done a little ELA, the English Language Arts, which is a whole nother podcast that I won't weigh you down with now. But that was something that came out from the teacher workshops. So we're doing this, and then we've partnered with the Texas Equine Veterinary Association, NAVT, the American Association of Equine Veterinary Technicians and Assistants, to provide curriculum in our science program that is very directly veterinary. We are using guest speakers with them. They have sponsored some of our actual presentations. And we are identifying younger children now, not just teens, middle school, even a little younger, that are interested in potentially veterinary careers. And so we're fostering that with internships that are simpler. So none of this involves riding horses. There's plenty of programs for teaching kids riding and camps. This is a little different. That's why I think it's being received so well. And we just actually signed up 3 interns, brand new interns are coming in. They're all siblings. They were so excited. They all want to be different kinds of vets or animal science careers. And so that's really cool. They range in age from 12 to 16. And
okay, I'm just really curious to understand how this works. Can you give me an example of a class or what you did with a particular school and what it was that you taught using the horses? Like, what was the curriculum and what did you teach? I'm really curious how you put this together.
Oh yeah, I know. It's kind of fun. So I'm gonna give you the most basic one because it's the most fun one, I think, because it can be a little mind blowing. So let's take a homeschooling group. Like the last homeschooling group we had about 25 kids plus parents who came and teachers' parents. So some of the parents are teachers. Some of the homeschooling groups have outside teachers too. So you're talking about 30 people, right? The kids range in age, and I'm completely serious, from 2 years old, because they were the younger siblings of students, to 17. Full range of age. So that's my challenge. They all show up, and there they are staring at me. Maybe 2 or 3 people have been on a horse, the adults, and maybe a couple of the kids had a summer camp experience. That's it. That's all. They got nothing. So they come to our small facility here in Driftwood, Texas, and I kind of gauge the crowd, the excitability, the different things you would do as a teacher. And remember, I've already talked with the teachers about what they're working on. This is the first overview. And what we do is usually we start outside because the horses are immediately curious. So one of the keys to the program, in my opinion, is that we're using ex-racehorses, and we're also using ex-racehorses that raced a long time. They're called war horses. So these are horses that are coming off the track at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Nobody wants them. We give them a lot of turnout. We give them a lot of I think really getting them back into a natural environment within limits, because they have been running a long time. So they're like, I mean, I want turnout, but not too much turnout, right? They want a blanket, all these things. And these horses that ran a long time, they have really cool personalities, and they have anomalies. So remember, these kids aren't loose in the pen with them. So they're just observing these horses, and these horses will be like, look at all these kids. And they'll start trotting and running around. And that's a great crowd getter, right? The attention getter. And so depending on what the horses are presenting, that particular day, it was windy and cold. Front had just blown in. And so we started talking about the different horses right away. What can you tell me about this brown horse? How is he handling all this? What do you think is going on? And the brown horse, by the way, only has one eye. And it's taken a while to notice it because he's got a really thick winter coat. So it takes a minute, and he has all the nerve endings around his eyes. So there's actually expression in the socket, which is really freakish. So that's the start of the conversation. And then the other horse that's with him tends to be a little more mischievous. So he is sort of scared, but mostly he just wants to get a game going on. And the kids usually will pick up on that. And if they don't, I can ask them questions. Then we start talking about the environment with which they're in. Why is the fencing this way? Why don't I have the gate open? Why aren't they all out here? Like, what would be the different things? Now you're getting different answers from different levels of kids, right? And then the racehorse thing comes in. So we start talking about racing, because guaranteed at least one or two of them are running around. Like, that's what they do. And then we can talk about that. And so this is actually something that is very beneficial for both the younger and the older kids, is this idea of each of these horses has a history. So it isn't simply a petting zoo. Not that there's anything wrong. I think petting zoos are great. I actually recommend that people go to a petting zoo after they've done our program, because it's a nice complement, where the kids can get more tactile with the horses. But they have this whole background. They're sports athletes, they have stats, they've run a long time. They've won a lot of money. Some of them have had famous races. So from there, it almost always goes into a discussion about food. I'll take them to the hay shed. We'll do what would be sort of a standard presentation on food, but I take it one step further. We go to the manure pile. That's the money shot. So you go to the manure pile, because if the boys are getting bored, sorry, there's still a lot of gender stereotyping in my groups. I mean, I don't know what that is, but most of the time the boys, they're really interested in the manure. So we look at the manure, and we try to figure out in the manure pile. Now remember, we've talked about each of these horses by now, right? Now we're going to go into the manure pile. Whose poop is here? Can you tell? What would be your guess? And which is a mind-blowing question for a 7-year-old, but it's an interesting one. And so I'll get bizarre answers. They have no idea. They're just throwing it out there, right? And so we'll take it from there, and I'll actually start analyzing it. Now, if we have, again, remember, we have this huge age range in this group. So I'm having to engage on both the higher and lower level. So the best way to do that is usually I start drawing the older kids in and asking their opinion. Well, you probably know more about this. What would you say? And so then they start to be, I'm helping the teacher. Most of the time it's me just talking at the beginning. And so they're like, this lady needs help. And so I'll draw them in. From there, we go to is really the centerpiece, where we go to the barn. And now I have got a Western saddle. It's actually a Wade Tree saddle, big Caro bridle, Mercate rein. And then I have racing tack next to it, 2 saddles. And then I have a giant blown up photo of a Win photo that's out there too. And we start talking about the equipment. So the littlest kids can pick up the racing saddle, which is a big deal, right? But then the bigger kids are like, whoa, people actually ride in this, right? So now we're developing out where these horses came from, and now what do we have to do to train them? And would it be, then we go into the whole thing about racehorses sometimes don't have a good understanding of what trail riding is because they've been trained a certain way. And it's a really cool thing that they've been trained to do. I tend to focus on the positive with that, right? And so from there, would it be fair to be mad at the horse if the trail rider got on and kicked them and the horse took off too fast and they pulled hard on the reins and the horse went faster? Is that fair? No, it's not fair, right? Because there's been a misunderstanding. Now, for the more advanced group, let's say I have more teenagers, we might then go into a whole discussion about how horses don't have a prefrontal cortex and why it's the person's responsibility rather than the horse's to adapt. The horse literally can't go, Lynn, she seems like a nice lady. She's a little bit tense about this whole going fast thing. I think I need to change. They're literally incapable of that. Like, they have no comprehension, right? So that can be a really interesting thing. So you see how we're building on this. There's key concepts that I'm covering. We haven't even touched the horse yet.
How do you tie this into, like you said that you talk to the teachers about what they're working. So how are you tying it into the curriculum?
So let's say we have a science, science is a really good, or actually, let me skip that. Let me go to math, because everybody's always like, how do you possibly teach math other than counting the horses? So what we'll do with math is, so first we're establishing where these horses came from, their personalities. So they've learned something about them. If I know I'm having a math analysis issue that I'm going to be helping them with, I'll build that in even more so. This horse is nervous in the trailer, etc. So let's talk about a standard math problem, which involves all kinds of reasoning skills, right? So we'll talk about, one of the things we talked about in the last field trip is that in August of last year, we were doing, in Texas, we had a severe drought and we had high winds and low humidity, which means fire. So we were doing a lot of drills, at least at my facility, on making sure the horses were loading well. We had things always prepped and ready. And this also is a way to talk about environmental things if you wanted to go down that road as well. And then I'll say, okay, sometimes if there's evacuations, because I've unfortunately had to experience multiple evacuations, you get into a situation where you might not have as much time as you want. So here we go. We have to evacuate the horses. The good news is we have enough time to leave, but we only have about 20 minutes to load the horses. We have to do this pretty quickly. We can't go get more hay and alfalfa. I have got 7 flakes of alfalfa, 3 flakes of hay. I've got a 3-horse slant trailer. And we've already discussed how these 2 horses don't get along. This horse likes to eat. If he can eat, he's fine. This other horse doesn't care about eating, but he gets really nervous if he can't see his buddy. And then we go from there. And one of them is really hard to load. How do we solve this problem in 20 minutes? So I can break it down. I can incite the younger kids to figure out how to distribute the alfalfa. I also tell them how far away we're going and how long that alfalfa needs to last. Okay? So I can do that. I mean, I can do that all day long, and I can get really, really detailed. We can do algebra. We can do all kinds of things. We can do trailer loading using geometry. You can only use geometric terms from geometry only. You can't say lead the horse. You have to use another term. That's for the really advanced kids. There's nothing that you don't even have to touch the horses. And then we'll do, of course, we'll do demonstrations and so forth, right? So do you see how this can go? It has to be a little bit creative and adaptive. First of all, A, horses, B, kids. You put those 2 things together, you better be adaptable, which brings me in. Hi, I teach things I don't know anything about, and I do know a fair amount about math and science, so this is pretty fun. And I know about the horses. We also set up before the field trips, and this is just our most basic program, Wendy. This is just the Learning Lab introductory program, first trip out, right? I've you taking 1 lesson. They're saying math is an issue. All the kids hate word problems. Can you help me? No problem. Yeah. So the last part of it is a groundwork demonstration. We were very fortunate, and we had some supporters help us build a customized teaching pen next to the barn. So the kids can stand around and they're safe, right? We have a certain kind of fencing, and I can bring a horse in. It's partially covered, so we can do this in all weather. And we can do groundwork that shows all of the things that are necessary. We can have polls, we can do proprioception demos, we can do leading demos. We have 2 horses here that are exceptionally gentle. They're still, quote, real horses, so we always have to gauge. One of them is very tall and he's very gentle with the smallest kids. And that's a very interesting thing where we'll have the older kids read his expression. Of course, one of us is holding him while a very small child comes up so that they can see how soft his eye is. And then we always tell the parent can bring the small child too. So this is something that this horse, he's very gifted at, is that he's very quiet for small children, but he also has a lot of expression in his face. Again, these racehorses are very high. They're very interactive with people. And he's like, hello, I really, really want to sniff you, but I know it's scary. And the kids will laugh because they can see him thinking that, right? What else are we teaching them? We're teaching them to really understand the horse's body language, his expression. We're teaching them a lot about conformation, the horse's breathing rate. We're also teaching them indirectly about how the horse's cognitive process works. And they're getting really up close to their feet. And then if there's again, let's say we've got some kids that are getting a little bored. I'll use the feet as an example. I'll say, okay, we had that demonstration in the hay shed in the feed room. Look at his feet. What can you tell me about what he eats? And they're always like, we have no idea. And I'm like, just guess. What are you observing about the foot? And this horse used to be a racehorse. Do you see how his foot is different from this horse who's been here a long time? So that's, I mean, again, this is just the most basic part of it.
Right. So how long have you been running this program?
I have been running this program for 2 years now. It started out just very rudimentary, and now it's fleshed out so much that I'm pretty much doing it full time. So on the Horsewise side, you remember I created it, so I'm licensing to Lope to teach. I will actually do I'll do tutoring services with kids that are having a special problem with math or science, particularly, where they come and it's basically like a tutoring in person where we're going over those concepts in more detail with the horses as, again, demonstration models. It goes above and beyond conformation or, equine science, preparing you in that regard, like a pony club. Nothing wrong with, I mean, pony club stuff is great, but these kids usually aren't equestrians. That's what's so interesting about it.
Right. So you've been running that program for 2 years. How many schools or groups do you have involved at this point?
I have, let's see, let me just count real quick because they keep changing. So I've got about five homeschooling groups, 3 private schools, one has not yet come. And then we've worked with 2 public schools, so that's 10. And that's with no real advertising. So this is purely word of mouth.
So now, okay, I have another question. How many times has like a particular school or group come back to you at this point?
We typically, the first one's free. So it's kind of like cocaine. So I give you the first one free. We've had 3 that have come back for seconds. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have like 6 kids who want to be interns that are coming from the programs, right? One of the schools wants to do a regular after school program with us and they want us to teach a summer program. Another school is interested in the same thing, but they haven't worked through their upper.
Okay. So in 2 years, what you've done is proof of concept, and you already have kids that want to intern. And so clearly the teachers are seeing value. So what is it that the teachers are seeing in their students from this experience?
So the main thing that and again, we're not pitching to kids who want riding lessons. Many of them end up wanting riding lessons afterwards, but this is not just about kids who are already onto the horse deal. That's just an important distinction for what I'm about to say. So I have a colleague who works in the education department. She's a professor at Baylor University, an education professor. Her specialty is informal learning, which is an actual term, which I did not know. But it turns out I've been an expert. I've been an expert in it my whole life, going back to graphic design. I didn't even know this. So informal learning actually means something in the technical education field, which is where you use alternative methods to present concepts to kids so they get so engaged in learning that you then don't have to do the traditional memorization. They just get it and they go. It's like setting the spark and they go. And then you don't have to spend so much time as a teacher sort of keeping them on the path, right? They're already on the path. They're on it. They have the scent. Let me mix as many metaphors as possible. They're on the scent, right? You no longer have to do any dragging or anything. They're on it. And they get so excited and so on it that then teaching is easy. It's easier for the teachers and the learning is so much more straightforward. So what were the teachers that I've been kind of dealing with and who are giving me feedback, what they say is that the engagement level is so much higher. So the kids, there's one place we did a presentation at 2 years ago, the kids are still talking about it.
Wow.
So I know. And that was just me going without a horse, okay, and my gear and, my long-suffering staff who have to be the horses and everything. And it was really interesting to me because it's just what I talk about. I don't know if you can tell, but I just find this really fun and interesting. It's very engaging.
Oh, no, I don't. I don't think you're interested at all. No, never.
Okay. I'm kind of low key. So this is just who I am, right? This is what I love, and I'm so grateful for what these horses have taught me. And I also love sharing what they taught me, some of which had nothing to do with equestrianism at all, right? So they taught me to use my mind better. That is really the thing that I got the most out of my time with the ex-racehorses is they taught me to think critically. And that is a lost skill.
It is a lost skill. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the COVID learning gap is the thing that has really hammered home that disengagement can be catastrophic, particularly for certain age groups. And it was nobody's intention for that to happen, of course. We didn't want mass numbers of children dying. I mean, it's fair, right? No one knew at the time. So everyone was just trying to be safe, just trying to do the right thing in the moment. But it has had a really serious impact. And that's when we realized we were hosting these sort of very, safe space, safe distance field trips with the horses. And the parents two parents started to cry. Like they hadn't even touched a horse yet. And I'm like, this is amazing, So that is the main thing, is the engagement level, the fact that they're still talking about what they learned, not just, wow, that lady's crazy. It was more like, that was so interesting. Do you remember when she roped the math teacher and she showed us that thing? And so that's the other thing. I'll send home classroom exercises that you can do with lead ropes and everything, because we also want it to be beyond a field trip. My ultimate goal would be for us to be able to either charge or have scholarships so that people and schools could do this on an ongoing basis, because it does take a certain amount of time and effort. And I'd love to develop it. I mean, the ultimate goal is to develop it as a model that can be used, replicated in other counties. And the type of horses we have, again, I think are a big, big part of that. These horses are very unique and they bring very unique things to the table. And so it's cool to be able to give them a job that's very meaningful. And, it's just interesting. The group we have at my place, they know it's their job. It's really funny. So the blind horse, the horse who's missing an eye, he lost his eye as a baby. He raced until he was 12. He ran 106 times, all with just one eye. And horses adapt really well to that. That's not necessarily the most amazing thing. But at the track, he used the chain as his seeing eye dog. So they would use the chain on him. So he was like, when I feel massive pressure, I know I need to turn this way. So I don't use a chain. So he and I had a discussion for like 4 months about, hey, we don't do it that way. And he's like, I need you to chain me. And I'm like, I don't do that. You're going to have to do this boundary. And he was like, you're not safe at all, lady. And it's like, I am. There's a different, anyway. So what he'll do every time there's a group, particularly the mixed kids, I think there's something about the smaller kids that just visually the horses really respond to. He'll come up to the fence and he'll be a little like this with his good eye. He always does it with his good eye. He'll come up because he checks everything out with the good eye, right? And he's like hyper vigilant on that side. And he'll come and they'll be like, oh, he's scared. And then when he feels more relaxed, he'll come and he'll very deliberately place himself on the fence near them with his blind eye to them, with the socket. And I'll say, wow, you guys, why do you think he's doing that? And they'll be like, he trusts us. And I'm like, that's right. He's understanding you guys aren't a threat. And he does that every dang time. It's like, you are a pro, buddy, because I know he knows that these kids aren't a threat. But it's like he comes, it's like he knows it's his job. So it's really cool.
What's interesting is it's almost like you've taken the concept of EAL, equine assisted learning, and wrapped it into a school program, which is it's kind of like the next level, if you will, because I mean, EL is fabulous and getting people to be, interacting with horses and that sort of thing. But to take it to a place where you're actually then using it to do math problems and that sort of thing, because that's going back to the schools as opposed to just being emotional
Correct.
connection. You've got an intellectual connection, a learning connection where they're now really keen to learn. And so my next question then is, these older kids that want to intern with you, what do you think their life choices might be? How old are they at this point?
They range in age right now from 11 to about 16. And the average age I'm getting is about 12 to 30, which is a really good age, by the way.
Oh, it's a great age. 12 is a fabulous age. It's before puberty but still old enough to be fairly coordinated. So, I mean, if we pull back the lens for a second and look at the bigger question of the veterinary crisis that we have and where are we going to find people capable of understanding what this is all about, right? I think that people who go into vet school but don't have a real it used to be that you were with the farmer vet, that you went on the rounds with him, and saw all the cows and the pigs and everything. Do you think that this is a way to bring people into a possible career with horses, and even perhaps in the veterinary world?
Definitely. And I think what my secret goal is, not secret anymore since it's on a Wendy Murdoch webinar, is that it would bring it would engage interest in a veterinary career, but also bringing this perspective that is a little bit more modern about taking that whole animal into account, which would track with potential changes in the veterinary field one day. Because again, I need to, and I like to teach things that are evidence-based. That's really important to me. And I also want to open up that world of horsemanship, of how these horses think, and how the fact that each horse is different is part of the nature of the horse, the biology of the horse, the way that nature made the horse, and the way that we then bred and changed all of that a little bit. And I want that to be part of the picture, rather than being a vet is a really great career financially. Like, I'm interested in these horses. I want to help them. Maybe down the road, they'll go, I don't really want to go to vet school, but maybe I want to be a vet tech. Maybe I want to be a certified vet tech. Maybe I want to take the time and effort to become certified in a certain kind of body work. Maybe I'll do this part-time. But it's bringing this overarching idea of compassion and understanding of the horse that is actually practical. Now, nothing against programs that are purely emotional. I tend to shy away from those, even though I've certainly felt a lot of emotions around horses, and that's a big thing that they bring us, right? But I can't teach that. I can't replicate that. And the whole thing is about critical thinking skills too. Right. So how can we take that and help kids get better at science, help them get more engaged with the natural world instead of this all the time, which has its strengths. But the amount of kids that I have met that have no spatial skills is alarming. And the thing that's really interesting about the horses is that they all pay attention around the horses because they're 1,000 pounds. Yeah. It's really clear cut that you need to be aware of your space. And so that's kind of my overarching goal. And that's what I'm getting. Lope started just a basic teen intern program. It used to be a volunteer program for kids who needed basically community service as part of their graduation requirement. And we started mentoring kids and teaching them, about horsemanship. So we've had now 25 interns through that traditional program, over the years, a few each year. 5 of them are they're in some kind of an equine or agricultural program geared toward equine. One of them just applied to vet school. She's the oldest. She just applied to vet school. So that's 20% of our interns from our previous, where we weren't even teaching this explicitly, okay?
Right.
It was just exposing them to these horses. They were already equestrians, really good riders, but they got very interested in the horsemanship, primarily, again, because of these horses being such incredible teachers of it. And because they weren't perfect warm bloods, something about that competitive part of the teams, that just fell away. They were no longer interested in these horses for what they could do for a discipline or a show ribbon. So this opened up this other world, and it led to that in a way. Now, these girls were already talented girls. I'm not saying we changed their lives, but I think our program had a lot to do with it. And it's interesting that we can say 20% of that that's just us groping in the dark the first time.
Well, and the thing is, there's so many careers being around animals, and career paths for people. I mean, with the large animals, it's not just horses. You've got cows and pigs and sheep, and all this, or an interest in farming. I mean, it gets them connected back to the earth, if you will, and back to agriculture and back to the land, yes, which is so critical. I mean, farming is really important, right? If we don't have somebody farming,
food
yeah, exactly. So
I like that. I'm a big food fan. Yeah.
So making that connection, somebody's here says, Ginny says, it reminds me of the early days of Montessori, groundbreaking and revolutionary, and using horses who gave their all now are worth nothing. Yeah, and so valuable. And so I suppose you have probably considered taking this into a nonprofit situation so that you can get grants and that sort of thing, because it sounds to me like once you've done proof of concept, and there are other places where there are, you know, retired racehorses and like I said, EAL programs and that sort of thing that could just graft on the pieces or bring in the pieces with the educational part. Now, obviously you are a gifted teacher and you're able to see where the students are focusing and be able to sort out the different levels, but that's a curriculum that
Correct.
can be
correct,
you know, taught as
and that's what I'm doing. Yes, correct. And that's exactly what my goal is. And that's why that Horsewise is the one that owns that curriculum. And also on the Horsewise side, which is the for-profit side, I'm also contracting with vet associations to do horsemanship videos for teaching safety and awareness, because they're seeing so many, let's just take vet techs, but it can be other areas too. Also, a veterinary association is interested in this as well. Young professionals coming into the field are coming from a different pool than they used to.
Yeah.
So it used to be all horse people who are coming. Now you've got people who maybe aren't specifically horse driven. They might be part of a mixed practice, just like what you're talking about. And they don't have the safety element. They don't have the understanding behaviorally. They understand mechanically. So the vet associations are finding what I do valuable enough to pay me to do this, to come in and start teaching this from a different perspective about awareness for safety and so forth. So that's kind of interesting to me too, that it's both sides of it. Right. So I basically end up looking at, sometimes I'm working with 10-year-olds who might one day want to be vets. And I also might be working with a first-year veterinarian to show that, and it's not that I'm so perfect at all this. It's just, I have a way of seeing it, and the way that I teach it, as you say, I've developed this curriculum, a Horsewise curriculum, that I can then replicate and share. And it's all with this greater goal of providing value and good for the horse and for the people who love their horses. So
well, it's for the benefit of all, because if you're not safe, you get injured, you're out of the pool of being able to help, right?
Correct.
I mean, and I mean, there's just so many aspects to this. But it sounds to me like the program that you've developed it has the potential to really feed the system. First of all, right? Like, we need to feed the system. We have to bring more people into our world that might not otherwise. And this is why I'm a big advocate, and people probably get mad at me for saying this, but having horses in cities, having carriage horses in cities.
I agree.
Humanely, right? We need to figure out the humane side of it. But if you don't have these people experiencing animals and horses, we will lose them, right?
I agree.
So it's finding that balance where we are thinking about the animal welfare, but also keeping the animals in the environment of people, because if people don't understand animals, farming is in huge trouble, and food is it. I mean, it's just, it all feeds together. We have to keep those loops working and connecting and feeding each other in order to make sure that, there's something at the end of the day.
Yeah. 100% agree. 100%.
Yeah. So this program sounds fascinating, and I'll be really curious to see how it grows. Obviously, you're in a state that is very open to it, and of course, there's a huge landmass and a lot of large animals in the state. But then how it carries over, I'm hoping that you're working on some types of workshops for the teachers to come in and understand the program, so that there's.
I am, and I would love to. I would love to even be able to go outside the state or go into the cities or to an area that is less of a landmass. So even if you lived in Dallas your whole life, which is a huge city, and you never ride, I think you feel like you know about horses because you live in Texas and Dallas. But there are some parts of the country that, the land is so incredibly valuable, or so incredibly, both scarce, I would why it's valuable. And the cities are so large that there's no easy opportunity. And there's a lot I can do. Remember, I did that presentation that the kids are still talking about, No, I didn't have a horse, and so how can I bring that just to engage excitement? And then what I would love to do is have teacher workshops where teachers come from out of state here, but it might be first I have to go and do that little bit of presentation in person to get people excited and to get some funding basically to do that, and bring them in, because I think it's really important to support teachers too.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And
and
like you say, the COVID gap, right? And these teachers are struggling with how to re-engage their students. And so there's so many aspects of this in terms of its possibilities and benefits to a whole range of populations. It's very cool. It's very cool. So let's see, are we in the middle of the school year? I suppose we are. I don't have children, so
me either. So slightly past the middle, and basically everything is cyclical in the schools. So the next big round of field trips will probably be, because it's weather based a little bit. I mean, we can host in most weather conditions. We have a project we would like to get funded where we cover our round pen, and that's the last piece of our campus. Everything else we've got covered for indoor teaching. We just need to cover that round pen. But it also tracks with post-spring break, pre-spring break. So post-spring break is where I'm getting a lot of interest for the next round of field trips. They tend to come in clusters. And it also tracks with what's being taught and when certain kinds of testing is required. So you're always sort of balancing that. And I talk with Texas teachers quite a bit so that I understand that, but because that's less of a natural world for me, the world of the state standards and the marks that everybody's trying to hit, so that I have that in my mind. And then the next round of field trips will probably be, larger ones anyway, will probably be end of April, early May. And then after that, everybody's thinking about summer. But I think I would really like to develop a summer program as a test pilot, because then I would have proven the model in all different formats, after school internship, field trips. And if we had an experimental summer program, it's a little harder here in Texas because summer is really, really hot. Right. But I need to I think that would be a good component to add in.
So have you started? I'm going to interrupt you and ask you a question. That's what I do. Have you started any kind of outreach with other organizations or nonprofits or anything like that in terms of letting them know about this program or reaching out to them to learn more about the program?
Other than veterinary associations, no. And of course the schools themselves, but I think I'm at the point where I'm ready to do that. I think there is this, as you pointed out multiple times, the proof of concept is really important. Right. And I think I'm a little stunned at how quickly it happened. It's almost like
2 years is nothing. It's nothing.
It's nothing. And I mean, it's just like, wow, we're good to go. We have been talking to Baylor University about how we record results and everything. Like, we want to make sure we're setting up for academic study. Like, we got that component started as well.
Oh, grant money.
Yeah, grant money. Exactly. That's because that's why I licensed this to the charity, for $1, so that they could teach to the K through 12, because I think that there's really a strong community service element to this.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's more reasonable to fund it through grants than to do it as a commercial enterprise. I think also I feel a little passionate about it, and I see it as a service that I'd like to offer. The other applications of the program, Horsewise will charge for those, private tutoring and, video education, so that makes sense. But this, I'm really passionate about. This is where I think the real important part of the work is. And so it is time, I think, to start talking to some of the larger education institutions and educational foundations about partnering, and also about, grant opportunities to fund the next round, whether you call it proof of concept or
no, you've proved the concept. You're into the next phase. So if people wanted to get in touch with you to talk to you about your program, or so that they could learn more, how can someone get in touch with you?
Well, there's multiple ways. If you want to read about the charity version of the program, it's at lopetx.org/.
Can you type that into the chat?
I sure can. I'll check. This is going to be the charity website right there. And then to reach me directly, the best way to do that, I'm going to type the Horsewise email in.
Okay, it's literally Lope, LOPETX.org.
Correct. It's a simple one.
Yeah, that's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Horsewise Coach at iCloud. Okay.
Yeah, so you can email me and then I can talk about it with all my different hats on, as opposed to just the charity hat. And if anybody who's listening or watching this later is associated with an education program or a veterinary program or a horse welfare program, equine care program, and you would like to talk to me or get more information, please reach out. I don't care what state you're in too. Because of my podcast, I have listeners in all 50 states and like 102 countries. It's ridiculous. I think it's because my mom like told everyone to listen to it, is basically my ongoing theory. But so I actually, I am also willing to, if you're an organization, come out and do a meeting with you or something along those lines if you're not in Texas, because I do feel like it's really important to get the word out about this. And then for my purposes, the more that I can teach it and the more that I can set, the better the program gets, the more data we have for the curriculum, because I am continuing to adjust the curriculum. Obviously, I have.
You'll always be doing that, okay? I'm just telling you.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I know you would know, right? So, and I'm so pleased that you are interested in the program, because you are so good with the curriculum. You do understand how important teaching is, and to teach in a way that people really make those leaps themselves, right? We set it up so that the people can find it, right?
Right.
And so I really appreciate that. And it really is very validating to me that I'm on the right path, because you are someone that I have found to be very inspiring and a role model as to how to be a teacher of the highest level. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate it, Wendy.
No, it's great. I think that this could, we have to look at so many different, there's not going to be one solution. There's going to be a lot of solutions, but this is certainly a solution to bring people into our industry at a level where it inspires them, and it doesn't require, they don't have to be riders. So I think that's fabulous. All right, Lynn. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. This has been really interesting. I didn't really understand your program at all, and I'm really glad we spent the time and really dove into it. And hopefully people will reach out to you to learn more, and we'll see this program grow.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thanks.
Bye-bye.